Welcome to another episode of Eric's Perspective. Joining me today is the very talented artist and author, Kadir Nelson. Kadir, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate you coming down.
Oh, thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent. So if you don't mind, I'd like to start, as I would like to put it, from the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Silver Spring, Maryland. I was born at home.
Oh, you were a home birth.
I was a home birth, yeah.
You know what? My oldest daughter was a home birth.
Is that right?
In Columbia, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Just a little coincidence kind of a thing. And Silver Spring actually is where I grew up. Another coincidence. So what part of Silver Spring were you born in?
You know, I couldn't tell you.
Oh, okay.
We didn't live there long enough for me to have to know where I was. You know, we moved when I was probably about 3 or 4.
Oh, okay.
We moved to Atlantic City, New Jersey. So I remember moving. I have some memories of living in Silver Spring, but as a 3-year-old, you don't know.
Oh, of course. Totally understandable. So basically, you grew up in New Jersey. Is that fair to say?
I grew up in both New Jersey, South Jersey, and San Diego.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Split.
So about how old were you when you were in San Diego? Do you recall?
We moved there when I was 10, about 10 years old, and I lived there until I went to college. I went to Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. Okay. I was there for 4 years, and so then I moved back to San Diego, and then I moved to Los Angeles.
So looking back on it, can you recall that first instance where you kind of discovered this tendency to produce art? Do you recall that moment?
Well, it's probably when I was about 3 in Maryland. It was something I was really loved to do.
Uh-huh.
My first memory, I'd say, is probably trying to draw a self-portrait at about that age. And I just really, I think I just took to it. It just made sense to me. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. And when did you start taking lessons? Do you recall that?
I began taking lessons from my uncle, who's an artist.
Oh.
His name is Michael Morris, artist and art teacher. So I studied with him. I wouldn't say it's formal training, but I stayed with him for a summer when I was about 10 years old, and I had one-on-one mentorship.
Oh, wow.
So I became his apprentice, and before then, I'd had kind of standard art classes in school, and my uncle, I'd see him from time to time, and he'd give me some paper and pencils and materials to work with. But I think I got more serious about it, as did he, when I was about 10 years old. He expressed to my mother that he wanted to. He saw that I really loved drawing. I was very serious about it, so he said, send him to Maryland, and I'll take him under my wing and show him how to take it more seriously. And he gave me a really strong foundation.
Oh, fantastic!
Mm-hmm. So then 6 years later, when I was about 16, he invited me back out to learn how to paint with oils, which is the medium, my medium of choice.
And currently,
today.
that's your favorite medium.
It is. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. But prior to the oils, what were you mostly doing? Was it mostly drawing? Is that safe to say? Or?
Mostly drawing. When I studied with my Uncle Mike, he taught me how to use a number of different materials, like color pencil, pen and ink, watercolor. And when I went home after that summer, and I just kind of was really inspired to create more art, a lot of art, and I ended up taking an art class in high school. My art teacher, her name was Miss Buck. She said, it's time for you to start painting. So she really pushed me to try different media, and the first medium I used, started working with under her, was acrylic, but it was very similar to watercolor, so it wasn't a difficult transition.
Okay.
And then after then, my uncle taught me how to paint with oil. So that was my kind of evolution.
Fantastic. By the way, is your uncle still with us?
Yes.
Oh, excellent, excellent.
Yes. He's retired, but still, still producing
So,
art.
is he a painter mostly?
He does everything. He
Oh,
does,
okay.
2-dimensional, 3-dimensional. So
Oh, sculptor as well.
sculptor, carpenter. I mean, he does ceramics.
Wow.
He's well-rounded.
Fantastic. A Renaissance man sounds almost like. So I'm just curious, what is it about oils that you like so much more than, let's just say, some of the other media?
I mean, I think it has a lot of history as far as traditional artists and a lot of very serious artists, Renaissance artists, use the medium, and it has longevity, has really great. It's very forgiving.
As opposed to acrylic, let's say, because I've heard other artists talk about it, that dries pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. Whereas oil, you got a lot more time to work with.
Yeah, and as far as matching color, it's a lot easier. So if the color dries, or the paint dries, it's easier to match the color.
Ah, okay.
Once it dries, but acrylic, not so much. Often acrylic dries a bit darker than the color that it when it's wet.
Yes.
So it's a bit trickier. I mean, of course, people use it and
sure.
are comfortable with it, but once I tried oils after working with acrylics, I realized, first I didn't like it, but then I went back to acrylic and realized I actually don't like acrylic. I like oil. So, I've stayed with oil ever since.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Other than your uncle, as you were developing your skills as an artist, are there any artists that you would count as influences on your particular development as an artist?
Well, I ended up studying at Pratt Institute. I had really great professors. My drawing professor in particular, I studied illustration, but he was an illustrator, but he was a really incredible draftsman, and his name was Dave Passalacqua. He was probably one of my most influential professors while I was there. Mm-hmm. As far as being creative and I think fueling the passion of the fire for creating art for his students. He was very inspirational. I had other really great instructors as well, Pete Fiore and Jerry Contreras and a number of others. But beyond my professors, that list of influential artists, I think, is pretty long. I mean, Ernie Barnes was certainly one.
Okay.
I often draw a blank because it's such a.
It is such a so many different artists.
Because there's N.C. Wyeth, there's Charles White, Egon Schiele, there's Gustav Klimt and Norman Rockwell, Dean Cornwell. I mean, there are illustrators and painters, and I think during the early 1900s, and a bit after, there were a number of artists who really kind of blurred the line of illustration and fine art because a lot of them were traditional. Well, they were all traditional painters, pretty much.
Right.
There was no digital medium at that point.
Right.
So a number of them had to be, kind of classically trained as painters.
Yes.
So that's kind of where I like to, hang my hat. It's kind of this confluence of narrative art and fine art. Painting. So
yes.
That's what I really like. I like craftsmanship, and I really love storytelling.
Well, one look at any of the pieces you've produced definitely shows off your craftsmanship is superb, let me just say. It's fantastic.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And we should add, by the way, that you went to Pratt, if I'm not mistaken, on a scholarship, correct?
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
Somebody recognized all that talent. And
well, the funny thing is that I went there initially on an architecture scholarship.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. I think along the way, that age-old cliche of the starving artist was very much,
alive
on my mind
yes.
and alive. And I'd heard along the way people say, well, you know, you might not do so well as an artist because artists traditionally struggle. So why not get a real job, you know? And
right. I love that. I love that characterization to the real job.
Right.
Thing, right.
Right. But, you know, and so I did that for one semester, and I realized that it wasn't for me. So I changed my major.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Did you ever dabble at all in architecture after that?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all.
I mean,
that was it.
Other than painting buildings. And
right. That's the closest.
That's probably it.
Okay. And so you were there for 4 years, is that right? Mm-hmm. And then what happened after that, in terms of you artistically? I mean,
well, I graduated with an illustration degree. Pretty much right after graduating, I began working. One of the first jobs I worked on was for the film Amistad. I was doing visual development artwork.
Okay.
Which is like concept artwork. It's not quite storyboards, but they hire Steven Spielberg, who directed it. Traditionally, for a number of his films, he hired artists to create a visual look and feel of the film with through artwork. So there were a number of African American artists who were brought on to try to create the look of this film to convince Spielberg to direct it, because he wasn't quite sure he was the right director for it. And he got a lot of flack for not being an African American, having directed The Color Purple.
Right.
Which, you know, I think is one of his best works, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
and a lot of people felt the same way, by the way.
I think so. I think so. So he and Debbie Allen, who produced it, she brought the project to Stephen and tried to convince him to take the movie on. So in combination with these, maybe there might have been 6 of us, African American artists, who were basically assigned different parts of the film to create the look for. So there's a middle passage, there's court scenes, and so forth. So and there were also some other artists that were working on Jurassic Park too, who contributed between working on, you know, painting dinosaurs and creating artwork for Amistad.
Yes. You know, it's funny, but a friend of our producers, our Tatiana and Nicholas, I'll give them a shout out right now. They're doing a great job doing this podcast. Is Jim Carter, and his dad actually was working on Jurassic Park, if I'm not mistaken. So
is that right?
Yeah. So there's like a little interconnectivity there. And on another note too, for The Color Purple, so Elizabeth Catlett did a Seeley image for The Color Purple. Actually, she did a second image too. Actually, it was I think it was Seeley opening up letters. So it was, you mentioned Color Purple and Steven Spielberg. So he had that relationship with Elizabeth Catlett as well.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool. So what was that like, by the way? Did you enjoy that whole experience doing the not storyboards but the imagery for that movie?
Well, imagine being having just graduated with not having any any prospects out there for work, and being offered an opportunity to work on a Steven Spielberg film. You know, I mean,
it's a home run, right?
It doesn't get any better than that. So I was really on cloud nine for the duration of working on that film. I got to work with the incredible production designer Rick Carter, who was also working on Jurassic Park and a number of other
and that's
films.
Jim's dad that we were just talking about.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
Rick.
And then, of course, you know, I grew up watching Debbie Allen on Fame and everything else she was doing.
Sure.
You know, so getting to meet her and work with her and create artwork that was really right in line with what I wanted to do. I really loved film. I loved creating artwork. I loved creating a narrative with my work. So it was a perfect fit.
Excellent. And after having done that, were there other similar projects to come on the line later, or was that pretty much the extent of your experience doing movies and that sort of thing?
Well, after that, I worked on an animated film for the other side of DreamWorks in animation, DreamWorks Animation. It was called Stallion of the Cimarron. It was very different than working in film. Animation it was a much longer process.
I see.
And it was a team, a larger team of people. I was closer to, well, for Amistad, I was a freelance artist, so I worked at home, and then had one meeting a week, But when I was on animation, I was an employee, so I was at an office. I was there every day, pretty much, and it was a very different experience. But I was doing something very similar, which was creating artwork to create the visuals for the film.
Oh, okay.
That the directors and the storyboard artists, everything kind of started with story and visual development. Story is of course the words, the written word, and then we were creating the visual kind of foundation that everything else would spring from character design to backgrounds, what have you.
Oh, okay. So you weren't really doing the animation itself. You were doing what was right before the animation part, where you were kind of giving visual ideas to the story.
Right. So if there were they'd give us these visual cues or story cues. They'd say for Amistad, the main character, his name was Cinque, was captured by rival people that were from a rival tribe, and he's put in a net and then dragged through the forest. So then I created an image that showed Cinque being dragged through the forest. My idea was that this was a very dramatic moment in the story, so it made a lot of sense for Cinque's face to be very close to the camera, and then so you can see the emotion on his face, and that he's confined by this net. And then in the distance, not so far distance, you can see the three men dragging him through the forest. I was very pleased to see that much of the work that I was doing was actually making it to the finished film, which is kind of not necessarily so common, because it's film is a collaborative art.
Sure.
So especially when it comes to animation, there's so many different artists contributing to each scene that often your work will be lost. It's not recognizable anymore.
Yeah.
But there were several instances where that didn't happen, where the idea made it all the way to the finish. So it was really, really satisfying. But I found the problem with the issue I was facing when I was creating artwork for animation was that I was getting lost in the mix. And I really wanted to have my work to have its own identity. And in order to do that, I couldn't work in animation in the capacity that I was working in. And I really loved and continue to love creating one-of-a-kind large works that kind of stand on its own, don't rely on the image that comes before or after it. It really kind of stands on its own.
It tells its own story. It doesn't need the other images to.
And that becomes the experience.
I see.
Where some of my favorite works of art are those where you can stand in front of it that hold your attention, and there's so much to absorb and think about, and then walk away with, and then come back to, and you see something new. That's, I think, some of the most effective art is the art that really stirs your emotions and your imagination and your soul.
I think that's an excellent point, because oftentimes, it's easy to just walk up to something and just look at it as a physical object and admire the beauty of it, let's just say, without consulting your own feelings maybe, or understanding how it's impacting you as a person. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very good insight into how to evaluate maybe and how to experience a work of art, is to open up to it. I remember reading somewhere that they did a study and most people spend like a couple of seconds at a museum looking at a piece, and it can be intimidating. You're in this big space and there's all this stuff to look at. You want to maybe take it all in, but to pause there for a little while might be beneficial, just to experience it in full. Sort of in line with what you're describing. I think that's a great way of looking at it.
Yeah, I think those are the best paintings where it is an experience.
Yes, absolutely. You've done a quite impressive list. You have a quite impressive list of like album covers you've done and other projects. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
was that any different than when you worked on the film?
I'd say certainly, because the work for album covers, I mean, one, of course I really love music. I always often listen to music while I'm working. Mm-hmm. But I think the difference is that this is a singular piece that has to tell a story and very quickly, or at least grab your attention very quickly, so that it'll hold your attention. But I think aside from, each one is kind of different, because I've done some kind of smaller ones for just singles that were kind of, very quick paintings, and then some were more involved, so. Right. I mean, for instance, there's the painting of Michael Jackson, which is, I spent almost a year working on. It was a huge, huge painting, and there were a number of iterations and changes that had to be made because there were rights involved and likenesses, copyrights, and all that. So
yes.
But then there was say the painting for Drake's album, which was kind of a double album, and had a painting of him as an adult, as a child.
Okay.
And for that one, I mean, say for the Michael Jackson painting, Michael had already passed
away.
So I wasn't able to consult him about what he wanted for an album cover, because when I did speak to him, he said that he just wanted a painting that told his life story. It wasn't for an album cover. It was just because he wanted a painting.
Oh, okay.
He'd seen a painting I'd done of Marvin Gaye, which hangs in Marvin's old recording studio, that was taken over and refurbished by John McClain.
Who was a friend of mine, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
So John wanted what do you call it, a huge tribute to Marvin. He wanted to treat the studio like a shrine to Marvin. Right. That's
beautiful.
Yeah. So what he asked for was basically like a movie poster of Marvin's life.
Oh, okay.
So I think he had one, and he pulled out a movie poster, and it was like he just wanted all this huge kind of montage of work. So that painting I ended up doing two paintings. He commissioned one painting, but then I just did another one. I said, "You're gonna like this one even more," And he resisted until he saw it. He's like, "Okay." So he ended up buying that one as well.
Excellent.
So,
excellent.
Unfortunately, I didn't know that Michael Jackson, he and Michael were friends. They grew up together.
Yeah.
So he had Michael was there recording after the paintings were done, and he hadn't been there in a while. And then he showed up one day, and he had these big paintings of Marvin Gaye on the wall, and he was really kind of taken aback by these paintings. He was very impressed with them, and Michael said, who is this guy? Get him on the phone, So he had called a few times, but I didn't get the message. I didn't have a cell phone. This was a long time ago. They didn't really have a cell phone at that point. So he didn't leave a message, of course, So I happened to be home one day when Michael was in the studio, and the studio manager called me and said, Michael's here and he wants to talk to you. Like, Michael, who? There's only one Michael, So he said he's going to call you in about 5 minutes. He's recording right now, but when he comes out the studio, he's going to give you a call. So he called, and I spoke to Michael, and he said, this is what I want. He was very, very gracious and said, he really loved the paintings. The studio manager was telling me, he was saying, Michael comes here just to look at the paintings sometimes. He doesn't even record.
Wow.
And then he would call, but I wasn't home. Oh, man. I only knew.
Of all the times, right, you missed the call.
Right. So, fortunately, I was there that one afternoon. I spoke to him. Michael said, I want one, but I want, he wanted his whole life story on canvas. He said, I want one like the one you did at Marvin, but I want mine to be bigger, So
physically bigger, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I did the painting as large as I could physically accommodate in my
in your studio at the time.
My studio at the time, which was just a bedroom. It was very small. So it was wall to wall. It was kind of like a 5-point turn to get that painting out of there. But
that's the other thing. Logistically, you had to get it out of the room, right? Once you finished it.
Right. Yeah, you can't build it in there and not get it out.
Exactly.
Break down the wall or something. Right. So, that's how that worked out. And so I did I was going to start on the painting, and then, he got into some legal issues, so that got tabled for a while, and didn't really pick it up until he'd actually passed away. And
so it began while he was still alive, and you
right.
finished it after he passed away.
Well, I began the conversation with Michael before.
Okay.
I didn't physically start painting it yet.
I see.
Several years had gone by, and then, John called me and he said, it's time for you to do that painting that Michael wanted you to do. He said, don't worry about what we do with it. We don't know yet. Just do the painting. It's important. So I did the painting, and they ended up putting it on his album. Wow. So that one also hangs in the studio, as well as the Marvin Gaye paintings.
Oh, okay.
And, it's a private recording studio, but a lot of people, well-known people record there. So
sure.
Drake was recording there, and he saw the paintings of Michael and Marvin Gaye, and he called me and said, I really want you to do a painting for my album. It has to be something classic. And of course, John was in his ear saying, you need to really make your next album like a classic, and in order to do that, you should have a painting like these older like classic albums. They often had artwork on it.
Sure.
Some of the best artwork has been on album covers, in my opinion, like Miles Davis' Bitches Brew. That's an incredible, incredible painting.
Absolutely.
So I ended up doing, the album cover for Drake, and he was working really hard on the album, and he didn't know what exactly he wanted. So he flew me out to Toronto, and we kind of went around like New York and Miami. So because he wanted me to see what his life was like,
Right.
And it was an extraordinary experience.
I can imagine.
Yeah, with all the fans and music, and he played some of the music for me on the album. And I really enjoyed it. So I was inspired to create something. So I ended up just really working on some things. I'd send him ideas, and it was a really
kind of a back
creative
and forth
exchange.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So he said, well, what about this? What about that? And then I did a drawing of him as an adult, and then I did one as a kid, as two different ideas for the same album. And he said, well, what if we take this one and that one, and they're looking at each other, and it's this kind of exchange between both of them. Me, as I'm speaking as him. He said, it would be me looking at myself as a kid, and a kid looking at myself as an adult, and that seems like a really kind of interesting dynamic. And I thought that was a really great idea, and put them together, and it worked.
Excellent.
So, that's how that worked out.
Fantastic. I have to tell you that my youngest daughter is an enormous Drake fan, as are Tatiana and Nicholas that are producers. So I just want to put that out there. They love Drake. I was telling them I'm kind of old school. Drake's uncle, Larry Graham, was somebody that I really, right? I like Drake too, by the way, but I kind of grew up on Larry Graham and Graham Central Station, and when he was with Sly and all that. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So like music runs in the family.
Runs in the family kind of thing, yeah. Now let's maybe talk a little bit more about your art independent of the commissions and everything. Are there themes that you really like to explore as an artist, and if so, what are they?
Well, I think what I have often focused on is history. Before the pandemic, my work was primarily historically based.
Oh, okay.
And I really enjoyed that space. I was kind of working, I think at the time, focusing on the Harlem Renaissance. And that, I think that was a space I really enjoyed being in. And then the pandemic happened, and then my artwork kind of shifted, the focus shifted to more contemporary subjects because of what we were all experiencing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't intentional, but it was something that I think it might have started with the George Floyd painting.
Oh, okay.
And that really, for me, it was, I felt a very meaningful shift, because I think it's great to retell history, because that it in itself is very important, but then taking that and applying it to what is happening in real time really felt satisfying, because I could use that history to bring us to that point of where we were when George Floyd was murdered, to give that some context.
Right.
And then it just kind of, like the pandemic, it just continued to unfold right before, history was unfolding before our eyes. Really meaningful, I think, touch points and milestones in our history, with feeling isolated, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the election, with having to quarantine, kind of on and on. And I think it was very satisfying. I think now I'm at a point where I do like the mix of old and new, and I think thinking about different ways of addressing that is unique to me and my work, but also will resonate with contemporary people, and I guess show a unique perspective, different and apart from what other artists are doing now. So I think I'm in that way, I feel like I'm still wrestling with finding a newer voice that is unique to me, but still speaks to my interest in what I want to say.
So I also noticed that some of your work focuses on the old Negro baseball league. How did you get interested in that?
Well, that happened really while I was in college.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it began in college.
Some time ago then, yeah?
Some time ago.
Yeah?
Yeah. So that was really a result of a friend of mine actually suggested that I do something on the Negro Leagues. And at that point, there wasn't a whole lot of information out there. Right. There are a number of books, but not as many as there are now. Right. So it took a lot of digging to kind of unearth that story. There was also a documentary, a Ken Burns documentary, Baseball, which was airing at PBS at the time. Mm-hmm. And within the documentary was a really was peppered with these really great interviews of Buck O'Neill, who was a former player and manager for Kansas City Monarchs. And he told the story with such enthusiasm and light and charm that I really was captivated with him and the history. So I wanted to learn more about it. So I did a number of paintings. I graduated. A couple of them ended up in Sports Illustrated. And from there, I got a deal to do a book to tell their story that I ended up both, writing and illustrating. So it took quite a while to do, but it was very satisfying. It was I had a really great experience. I got to go to baseball games, meet, Hank Aaron and
oh wow,
Willie Mays,
wow,
Dave Winfield, Tony Gwynn, and among others.
Yes,
it was a really, and of course I became very familiar, befriended the folks at the Negro League Baseball Museum.
Yes,
and I think really together we were able to help, further amplify the story of the Negro baseball leagues.
Yeah, which I think is fabulous. By the way, so for our listening and viewing audience, what's the title of the book in case anybody's interested in getting it?
It's called "We Are the Ship: The Story of Negro League Baseball." Excellent. And it comes from a quote. The title comes from a quote by Rube Foster, who was the founder of the Negro National League, which was the first and I think most successful of the Negro leagues. And his declaration was I call it like the Declaration of Independence from the major leagues, since they weren't allowed to play. African Americans, people of color weren't allowed to play in the majors.
Yes.
So they created their own league, and Foster borrowed the quote from Frederick Douglass.
Oh.
I saw you have a really great painting of a catlit piece of Douglass there.
He's my personal hero, man. This is an incredible man.
So his quote was, "We are the ship, all else the sea." There might be a couple of tweaks there in the language, but that was the quote that Foster used to declare the independence of the Negro Leagues.
Yeah. So
I kind of abbreviated it and used it as the title for my book.
I think that's beautiful. I should also mention, by the way, so we had another guest for this same podcast season as you're going to be a part of. His name is Byron Motley. And
I know Byron.
You know Byron?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, he was just celebrating the 100th anniversary of the league, I guess, and he's got his book out, and so he told some interesting stories. His dad was the umpire. Yeah, that was really cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So historically speaking, aside from the Negro Baseball League, or any other historical figures you found particularly interesting enough to create like a body of work around, similar?
Well, I mean, right now, I have two like really kind of behemoth projects, book projects that I'm working on. The first, which I'm finishing up as we speak, it's a history. It's a book on the history of basketball. So it covers, and I really love basketball. I played pretty much since I was a kid.
Oh, really?
And I still try to play now.
Excellent. Excellent.
But it's kind of like my love letter to basketball. It's 50 plus paintings that tell the story of the founding of the birth of the birth date of basketball to present day. Mm-hmm. And I try to touch on not just, of course, the NBA, but basketball as a whole when it comes to, say, the Black Fives or the women's leagues or the neighborhood teams, all the innovations of basketball, how it was very separate at first, like five fingers on the hand, but then comes together to combine the horizontal game that it began as, and then kind of becoming this vertical and kind of diagonal game that incorporates not just gameplay, but athleticism, innovations, and so forth. So it's kind of a comprehensive journey that's told through the eyes of the African American players who weren't part of the birth of the game, but adopted the game and also kind of made it, put their own signature stamp on the game so that it's become what it is, the game that we enjoy today.
Oh yeah, sure. Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that because I'm a huge fan of basketball as well, and I think that one of the things that appeals to me is sort of what you were talking about. It really kind of blends because there's design plays and there's structure, but at the same time there's spontaneity and sort of creativity involved.
Yeah.
And you see the plays develop, and unexpectedly something will happen because that wasn't what was drawn up, but it turns out to be an exciting thing to watch.
Yeah, I think it is within it. It's kind of spontaneity is built into the game, or there's a space for it.
Yes.
And it's kind of dull. It can be dull for a moment, but all of a sudden something really spectacular happens.
Exactly.
That you didn't anticipate. And one of the things I really love about it is that it's the court is always the same. The structure, it's always the same. Yeah. But when you bring a group of individuals to play this game, it's never the same. It is always something new and different in every moment. So that's what's really exciting to me.
Oh no, absolutely. Oh my God, that brings me back. I'll never forget going to a game. This was back when Magic and Kareem were playing, and I will always remember watching that fast break. Here's Magic Johnson. He's 6'9". He's like a point guard that's typically much shorter, and making plays happen. And the famous sky hook. Who can not admire that kind of thing, right?
I agree. You have these singular talents like Magic and Kareem, but in watching, say, Magic play, it was like he had his own rhythm that I've never seen it anywhere else. The way that he kind of handled the ball, the top of him is going back and forth, and you just never know what he's going to do, what he sees, how he sees.
Well, yeah, and that patented no-look pass, and he's looking one way, and even I, watching as a spectator, I'm like totally fooled.
Right,
the ball ends up in Norm Nixon's hands, and he's shooting a jumper or something.
So he was a master of deception. I mean, that's what basketball is,
Yeah,
but he was a master of it. It's really amazing.
Fantastic. Yeah. By the way, in the book, are you just doing the images, or are you writing it as well, like you did the other book?
I wrote it as well.
Oh, okay, fantastic.
Yeah. So it's kind of evolving.
Okay.
But after that, the other book project I had mentioned was a book on American music, which is kind of telling the story of American music, where it comes from and how it evolved, which I really didn't know much about. I kind of took music for granted because you have these different genres, but I didn't understand the story. I wasn't familiar with the story of how these genres developed, where they all kind of sprung from.
Yes.
Which is very fascinating to me, and now I more fully appreciate the music that we listen to today, knowing where it came from.
Oh, okay. And would that be kind of like winding the clock back to maybe the beginning of jazz, or does it go beyond, even further back in time than that, for example?
I'd say even before jazz.
Before jazz.
So, I mean, this goes back to the birth. It's really in tandem with the birth of America
itself,
and American music.
Oh, okay.
So where does the music that came from overseas,
Europe, right?
Europe and Africa.
And Africa, yeah.
And, how it blended and sprung, sprouted these other genres. It's really fascinating.
Oh, excellent. Yeah. Anything that stands out, for example, that you could say, that you found really remarkable, that it's kind of one of those aha discoveries?
One of the things that I would say that really stood out to me was the birth of jazz music, and how that came about, not just from these musicians and African music and European music, French, influences, but also why they were using these particular instruments that kind of, from what I understood, was this kind of surplus of brass from the army, from the war.
All right, marching bands, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So they took those instruments and really began to improvise and create their own musical vernacular, which was so creative. It's really kind of indicative of the, I'd say, African American people, where we've taken something that's already existed, this little bits and pieces of these things, and then created something new from it. It's kind of like the birth of hip hop. They have these existing music, but then they found a way to take bits and pieces and mix them together in a way that had never been done before. That was really exciting and new.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what jazz was. You know?
Yeah. Gospel too, I think, as I just was watching someone on PBS about talking about.
That was very interesting too.
Yeah.
You know, you take gospel for what it is, and you think that it's just always been,
right.
But the blues is infused in gospel music.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The guy who created gospel music was a blues musician who had done some raunchy music,
right.
You know,
right.
But he took his sensibilities and of music and appreciation of the gospel and created this really kind of blues influenced spiritual music that was rejected at first, but now we've fully embraced it.
Oh yeah, that same thing. It was really amazing to me too. I was just I'm forgetting the title of this PBS program I was watching, but it was talking about Mahalia Jackson, for example, and it made an interesting point that she was so influential with Dr. Martin Luther King. Part of it was musical. I mean, there was this one clip where they show him, he's getting ready to make a speech and the camera is recording him. He looks a little bit nervous and he's trying to pull himself together. And then Mahalia Jackson all of a sudden starts giving him words of encouragement and starts singing. And his expression completely changed. It's like he just all of a sudden got plugged in. And even his famous I Have the Dream speech, I was kind of surprised to hear that she was the one that says to him, listen, tell him about the I Have the Dream thing. You know, she's encouraging him. So it's that kind of a spiritual thing, but it's musical at the same time. And now I understand why Catlett did that big, beautiful tribute piece to Mahalia Jackson in New Orleans, right? I mean, she was a very influential person in multiple ways, not just even in the music, but using the music as a source of inspiration. I have a friend that says music is medicine. You know, you just kind of use it to heal yourself even.
It's really amazing to I guess see and appreciate the influence of not only music, but I'd say women in the course of history in these historical moments. I think how she comforted him through music and inspired him through music. This kind of soundboard behind the scenes that, or to inspire thought or motivate specific movements. I mean, look at the Black Lives Matter movement, which was really birthed and amplified by African American women who had really just had enough, you know.
Yeah.
Where it's like this is the way that we need to move.
Yeah.
And kind of spurred us on in the moments that we really needed. We really needed this energy to move us forward.
Sure.
Because we can sit and talk about it all day, but there has to be energy behind it. Right.
And when you say that, it makes I'm thinking back historically too with the Fannie Lou Hamer. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's amazing. Sharecropper background, and she emerges as this powerful force for change.
Right.
It was incredible.
I agree.
Yeah. So Kadir, I understand you've got, you've done over 30 some odd children's books. And then, in addition to that, during the pandemic, you one of your books won the Caldecott Award. Can you expand on that?
I'd done a couple dozen books up until 2020, children's books, illustrated or both illustrated and wrote, and I'd received for a couple of two of them I got the Caldecott honor, which is kind of a runner-up.
Okay,
but I never got the big award, and I'd done so many books, and I figured, well, this isn't going to happen, It's kind of, and that's not why you do this work, but
sure.
It is nice to be recognized,
Of course.
I felt like kind of like Susan Lucci,
Oh, right. Always nominated but never winning.
Right. So I was kind of over it, So I did have my basketball book on the books, and I planned on working on that. But I was asked to do a book, to illustrate a book written by Kwame Alexander, which was a poem called "The Undefeated." Actually, no, it's called a different name. It was called "This Is For Us."
Okay.
He had done a short video for a group called "The Undefeated."
Okay.
So they sent me the manuscript. My agent sent me the manuscript, and I really loved it. I thought it was really strong, well written, and right to the point. And this is before all the madness happened in 2020. This was probably in 2018 or 19.
Okay. By madness, you mean the whole COVID thing, the
Right.
outbreak? Yeah. Okay.
Right. So but I loved it so much, I figured I could kind of squeeze this book in, push my other stuff back and do this one, because I felt it was very important to do. And it could be done. I felt like if I do this, I can do it very quickly. So I would just do these paintings with no backgrounds. It would be like really strong vignettes. So, and I figured that would save me some time, so I'd be able to do it quickly. But it was similar to the style I'd used in a book I'd done on Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream, as well as some of my New Yorker covers.
Okay.
So I ended up doing the book, and ironically, I didn't end up saving any time at all. They all took, how long they take.
Right.
But by using this vignetted style consistently through the book with somewhat monochromatic images, that for many of them they're kind of, a lot of the subjects are emerging. They're covered halfway by shadows. They're like emerging from the shadows as a story. This really great homage to African-American individuals throughout history is emerging from the shadows. It became a really interesting visual metaphor for, a theme for this book. So, and then it would be punctuated by moments of like full color, where the brilliance of these subjects came into full sunlight, and I ended up using these historical references, say from Aaron Douglas, where you have these very graphic bursts of color, geometric shapes that really accentuate the brilliance of this history. And it ended up, really working out really well. I loved it because it was something new and different for me, and it told the story very effectively. And it was received and reviewed very well, and it ended up winning the Caldecott that year.
Well, congratulations, by the way.
Well, thank you.
That's fabulous.
And the thing is, I just kind of didn't care. I just did it because I loved it, and whether I didn't think I would get any, or wasn't thinking about any awards for it. It was just, just kind of a labor of love. So, and I didn't even know that the awards were going on.
Oh, because of COVID, you thought maybe it was all suspended or something, or?
I was just unaware of it.
Oh, okay.
So, waking up, my wife woke me up and said, you need to check your messages, like, what do you mean? And, she's like, you won everything, all these different awards, and the big one, and I just couldn't believe it. It's like, man, it took me not caring.
That's what I was thinking as you were saying it. Isn't that funny how that works? I mean, it's almost like it freed you up to just do what you felt that you wanted to do, and you really connected with the story as well. So I think that's probably the ingredients for that's kind of a success, I would imagine.
Yeah. So this was in January. So this is before the pandemic happened.
Okay.
But they didn't have the award ceremony. It's usually 6 months later in the summer.
I see.
But that summer, of course, it was COVID with no, we were still isolating. There was no vaccine yet. So it was just, we had to celebrate in isolation. By video. So we had to record our acceptance speeches, and my wife has a background in advertising and film, so
she was able to
set up the
orchestrate
whole thing, and I was sitting there in my, I looked like Barack Obama sitting accepting my award. So
that's great. That's great.
It was a very late night. We had helicopters flying overhead, and it was people were rioting at that point. It was pretty serious. So in between that, we had to try to get takes. What
a background, right? All that's happening.
Right.
So that's impressive, though. So you've been nominated twice, and then once you actually won the Caldecott. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And what about some of the other awards? Have you won awards for any of your other books or illustrations that you?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's of course the Caldecott King Awards for writing and for creating artwork. There's also a Cyber Award, which is a award for informational books. And another, they have regional awards. Certain states have their own awards that they give books. And
so would California have been one of the states that gave you an award, or?
Well, there was I believe it's called the Simon Wiesenthal, the Jewish Museum.
Right.
There's one there. There's one in Nebraska. The Golden Sword. Yeah, it was kind of wild because it was for a book called Salt in the Shoes with Michael Jordan's mother and sister, Rosalind Jordan and Dolores Jordan.
Oh, no kidding.
We actually went out on a little tiny plane out over those cornrows and
no kidding
accepted the award. Yeah, it was wild. It was crazy.
That's really amazing. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Thank you for sharing about that, and congratulations for all the awards. But the thing that impresses me too is that you're getting awards for your art, and you're obviously a very accomplished artist, but also for your writing as well. And so obviously you're excelling in that area as well. I think that's a really remarkable and very admirable thing.
Well, I appreciate it. I think they really just wanted to encourage me to continue writing. It's okay. Keep going.
Keep going. Keep cranking them out. Yeah. So when you write, by the way, are you focusing mostly on children's books, or are you writing? Well, obviously you wrote about music, though. That's not children's books. So you're writing about more than just children's subject.
I mean, they're published as children's books. Some of them, like there's one on Nelson Mandela, which was like a poem that tells his history, his story.
Okay.
But I don't think of them as necessarily specifically for children. I'm writing for the children and everyone, whether what age they're, where they land.
Yes.
But I say for the book on Negro baseball leagues, that was pretty much all ages, right. And I did one called Heart and Soul, which is the story of African Americans in America. So these are books that are published for kids, and I have to keep in mind that some things I can and can't say because children will be reading them, reading it. So I have to be sensitive to that. But I'm also thinking that this is not a book specifically for kids; it's for everyone.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you clarified that too, because I think sometimes you say children's books, it conjures up in my mind anyway. See John run, the barn is red. Right, so it's nothing like that simplistic or basic. Like
not any of my books. I have illustrated for very like small children, but for when I'm writing, I'm keeping everyone in mind.
So speaking of how your work in the books is really directed to people of all ages and backgrounds, I think it's worth noting your work itself is also available in multiple different and very prestigious venues. Can you speak on that? Where can people see your work other than in magazines and so on?
Well, I mean, there's a painting I'd mentioned, the sculpture I'd mentioned, that's at the World Trade. I think it's three World Trade Center.
Okay.
In New York City,
That's
as well
right.
as in public collections, like at the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery and African American Museum, National Museum of African American History and Culture.
Oh, yes, which is, by the way, a fabulous venue.
It is, and they share that painting. Actually, they share the painting of Henrietta Lacks.
Excellent.
As well as there's the National Baseball Hall of Fame. They have a painting as well. And San Diego Padres, they have a number of them. So it's kind of spread around a bit, so that people do have access to them, as well as the upcoming Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. They haven't opened their doors yet. I think within the next year or so.
Exactly.
They'll open.
And they're going to be in Los Angeles, by the way. I know at first they were talking about being in San Francisco, but
is that right?
Yeah, but now they're obviously they're well into the construction of it. But and we had the director as a podcast guest too.
Sandra.
By the way.
Yeah, she's
Sandra
amazing.
She's fantastic. The right person for the job, I think.
I agree. She brings a lot of expertise and knowledge to her position.
Absolutely.
And taste.
Exactly.
Just really great taste.
Exactly. Yeah. So once that museum opens, they'll be able to see your work there as well.
Yeah, they have a pretty large collection of my work there. Since they're focusing on narrative artwork, and that's one of my focuses.
Yes, it's a perfect match.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And I even understand the Capitol building, right? I mean, there's a piece that somebody could see if they walked into.
That's right. That's right. There's a painting of. There's actually a film coming out about her pretty soon. Regina King is doing the. She's playing Shirley Chisholm, but it's a painting. It's the official portrait of Shirley Chisholm, which is hanging at the Capitol building in Washington D.C.
She's speaking of powerful female contributors to the progress and history of all Americans, but especially African Americans. She fits that description.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool. A lot of the lawmakers there we've seen have taken a lot of kind of spontaneous photos with the painting. She's the painting of Shirley Chisholm is I think it has a lot of character in that she was described as being very straight backed, coming from the Caribbean islands, or the type of upbringing and no nonsense. So she's kind of got her finger raised, kind of admonishing the viewer, like, don't test me. So a lot of the lawmakers have gone up and kind of mimicked the pose.
Oh, no kidding.
Funny. Yeah.
That's like, I love that spirit, by the way. That was a great thing to capture. I have to I have to make my way into the Capitol building myself just to take a look at that for sure.
It was pretty amazing that at the unveiling, Dorothy Height was actually there. In the wheelchair, and Nancy Pelosi and a number of other lawmakers there. And a lot of, I think, Deltas. I think she was a Delta, so there were a lot.
My mother was a Delta, by the way. Yeah, excellent.
So it was pretty amazing. It was a really very interesting experience.
That sounds wonderful. So you were there for the unveiling, obviously.
I was.
That sounds like how long ago was that, by the way?
Geez, this was probably in 2008, maybe.
2008. Okay.
Around then,
roughly. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think people might be surprised to see your work in places they wouldn't expect to necessarily see it, like the Capitol building.
That's right.
So you illustrated books and done covers for albums and so forth. Are there any other types of covers, for example, that you've illustrated for?
If you were to Google me, what would come up first is probably New Yorker covers. Known as the New Yorker cover artist.
Okay.
And I guess it depends where you're coming from, but I mean, I began. My first New Yorker cover was probably in 2013, which was celebrating Nelson Mandela. And over the years, traditionally, what the New Yorker does, they ask or invite artists to submit ideas that they already have a rapport with.
Okay.
Often, for covers, versus them soliciting artists to do a specific idea.
I see.
So the creative director, she had been asking me to submit since the mid '90s, but I never really had much to submit because a lot of their artwork I felt was very humorous or satirical, and my work didn't
like
focus on that at all. So it wasn't until 2013 that they felt that that she had asked the creative director, Francois, she asked if I could do a painting that would celebrate Nelson Mandela.
Oh, okay.
So it took her actually asking me about a specific idea. So I ended up doing that cover, and I really enjoyed it. I loved seeing it printed. I loved the image.
Excellent.
And since then, she began asking me to do other covers. There was a 90th anniversary cover, and in maybe a few years ago, when Aretha Franklin had passed away, she asked me. She had just passed away, and she called me that morning and asked if I could do something to celebrate Aretha Franklin. But they needed, tonight.
Oh, so, wow. It was under that kind of a pressure.
Yeah, so I was kind of working on that all morning and landed on an idea. And the first image that really popped up in my head was, I remember a painting by Charles White he did of Harry Belafonte, of the folk singer.
Ah, yes, I know that image well.
So beautiful,
yeah,
powerful.
Right.
And I thought maybe I could do something that would be along the lines of that image to celebrate Aretha with, and it could be done quickly enough with, I'm working in graphite, so it was really, really quick. So I was able to do that in that day. So within the time frame that they needed. So, it's really been a really great way to amplify, the work that I do through the New Yorker and celebrate images and artwork or subjects that are more contemporary.
Yeah, absolutely. Aretha Franklin. Wow. Yeah, she was such a fabulous entertainer and singer, and could play the piano too. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but yeah.
You're a really incredible musician.
Absolutely.
All around.
Yeah. Is it true that I know you're primarily known as a painter and maybe a draftsman, but do you engage in sculpting at all?
I have dabbled a bit, certainly. I mean, I did a sculpture that is of Marshall Major Taylor, which is...
Oh, the bicycle, is that the same individual?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always really, I love sculpting. If I could, I love it enough that I could focus on sculpting and not do any painting. Because it's like painting or drawing in 3 dimensions, and it's just something about it. Just like when I was a little boy, holding a pencil and drawing felt right.
Yeah.
Sculpting to me feels the same way.
And when you sculpt, are you molding clay? Are you carving wood or
clay?
Clay. Okay.
Clay. But I would like to try wood, and I don't know about stone. That one's
that would seem to be challenging.
That seems like it would, very very challenging and not forgiving at all.
Exactly. Oh yeah. Speaking of Elizabeth Catlett, though, I mean, I look at some of the marble pieces that she's done, and she's done wood, and she's molded clay, and it made bronze additions out of that. And it's just remarkable how versatile she was in all those different ways to create sculpture. But like you said, the stone, I just wow, that's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, I had a friend in college who was working in marble. We were like, "What are you doing? How are you going to deliver?" in any timely manner.
Right.
He was going for it.
Have you ever displayed your sculpture in exhibits or in any other way?
Well, the Marshall Taylor, I think it went on. It was like a really small tour, and it ended up in the permanent collection of the World Trade Center.
Oh, excellent.
So it's there now. There was another, I think the wax or a different, it wasn't wax, it was a different material that was cast, and it may still be there at Pratt Institute.
Oh, okay.
But that would be the extent of it.
Okay.
So far.
So,
Yeah.
and are you currently working on anything in sculpture, or are you kind of leaving it alone for a while? Or
No, right now I'm just trying to finish this my paintings. I have maybe 15 more to go for the basketball book.
oh, okay.
It's a pretty big project.
Oh, wow, excellent! I'm excited to see that once it becomes available. That'd be fantastic.
Me too.
Is there anything else tugging at you in terms of what you might want to do in the future? You haven't started it yet, but something you're kind of thinking about?
Well, for now, I mean, there are a number of like personal works that I want to do. I find time to do. Often I go through my old sketchbooks, and I have a number of them earmarked for painting.
Ah.
It's just a matter of finding the time to do them.
Oh, sure, because obviously you're working on some pretty big projects. You got a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, by the way, is that your sort of your process? I know a lot of artists, they'll sketch ideas and then just leave it in the sketchbook, come back later and develop them. Is that kind of the way you work, or is it just a no set way? You just kind of proceed as you feel like it?
Well, I mean, for like personal pieces, sometimes you just kind of get on a kick, and all these ideas come. Or I'm inspired by something I see, read, or hear, or experience. But primarily, if I'm working on, say, a book project, then it's going to be pretty much for that. My sketches are going to be around that subject. But it's just, I mean, that's just kind of how it goes,
Yeah, sure.
Moved by inspiration.
Yeah. Okay, so in case anybody's interested in pursuing your services as an artist for commissions or whatever, how would they go about doing that then?
I think the easiest way would be through my website, kadirnelson.com.
Okay.
Through our contact page or the jkbngroup.com.
Okay.
Any of those inquiries will come straight to us.
Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Well, Kadir, thank you so much, by the way. This has been a fabulous opportunity for me. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences and thoughts with us. I really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right, excellent. So everyone out there, just want to say thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.